Chapter 58. Li Qingshan kicked away the corpse by his feet and grinned. It's much quieter now. Come, Chief Xiong, I'll give you a quick death. He tilted his head slightly. And the one behind me. Come at me as well. The second boss, who was dressed like a scholar, no longer had any hint of elegance. The scarf on his head had fallen off, and his entire body was drenched in cold sweat. He had managed to escape from Li Qingshan's hands thanks to his decent movement technique, but his courage had already been shattered. When Li Qingshan glanced at him, he took a step back as if he had been struck by lightning. Chief, I don't want to die here. I can't let my strategy go to waste. After saying that, the second boss turned around and fled. His body was light, and with a few leaps, he arrived at the entrance of the stronghold. The other bandits scattered as well, fleeing towards the stronghold's entrance. Trash. All of you are trash. Xianxia cursed loudly. If it were not for Li Qingshan stopping him, he would have personally killed these traitors. The instant the second boss was about to escape from the Black Wind stronghold, a dark green blade silently slid past his neck. Firstly, he was not as skilled as Yang Anji, and secondly, he had already lost his courage. He only cared about running for his life, so how could he guard against the small blade in the darkness? Blood sprayed out, and his pupils dilated. Even at the moment of his death, he did not know who had killed him. The other fleeing bandits all followed in his footsteps. The pitch-black stronghold's entrance seemed to have become the border of death. Xianxia could not see what had happened in front of the stronghold's entrance. He could only vaguely hear the sounds of heavy objects falling to the ground. He knew that those people had probably died. He felt a chill run down his spine. What did you do? Li Qingshan smiled in a flamboyant manner. I killed you, of course. After cultivating the path of white bone and great beauty, Little and was no longer afraid of blood. However, just now, when he fought, his killing intent surged into the sky like a battle formation. Little and could only wander around in the surroundings, unable to get close. However, it was perfect for him to launch a sneak attack. Those bandits that were running around in the dark were simply the best prey. They didn't have the slightest ability to fight back before him, and they stretched out their necks one by one to be executed. Xiangwu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The foundation he had built up for so many years had been destroyed in a day, destroyed in the hands of this brat. All the mountain bandits were guilty of crimes, and he was the only one left. The large Black Wind stronghold was reduced to a ghostly wasteland in an instant. Only the howling of wind and snow remained. Li Qingshan raised his spear and said, "Come!" Staring fixedly at Li Qingshan, Xianxia reached his trembling hand into his bosom and took out a pale yellow paper talisman with great care. He had obtained this talisman by accident, and it was not easy. It was the real life-saving straw. He did not expect that it would come to this, so he did not have the time to use it. But now, he could not care so much. Li Qingshan could clearly see the bright light on the paper talisman. His heart trembled, and the tip of his spear trembled. True qi gushed out, and he used the final move of the Overlord Spear technique. It was also the most powerful move, world domination. He charged forward, piercing through the air. Xianxia bit the tip of his tongue and spat it on the paper talisman. He flipped his hand and pressed it against his chest. A ball of light exploded, enveloping him. He shouted, "I'm going to kill you." Clang. The sound of metal clashing rang out. The invincible Overlord Spear was blocked by a layer of golden light, unable to move an inch forward. Little and wanted to help Li Qingshan, but under the illumination of the golden light, he could not take a single step forward. Xianxia grabbed the tip of the spear, and Li Qingshan felt a huge force that was not any weaker than his own. He almost lost control of the spear. He immediately used the ox demon stomps its hooves, and his feet bit the ground. His gaze was as resolute as a dragon, and he did not take a single step back. The two wrestled, and the iron spear, which was as thick as the mouth of a bowl, was twisted into an exaggerated arc. The distance between them gradually closed. 5 steps, 3 steps, 1 step. Xianxia suddenly raised his palm and slapped down on Li Qingshan's head. His hand was shockingly large, like a bear's palm fan. It did not match the proportions of his body, and now it was enveloped in a layer of light, making it seem even larger. Before the palm even arrived, the whistling wind forced Li Qingshan to be unable to breathe. He let go of the overlord's spear and retreated. He was scratched by the edge of the palm, and his heavy armor was torn apart like paper. He felt an intense pain in his chest, and it was even more severe than when he was cut by a sword. Bang! Xianxia and Wuxia seemed to be unable to control his own strength. He slapped the ground, and a loud sound rang out. The ground collapsed, and the momentum was even greater than Li Qingshan's just now. Ox demon stomps its hooves. Li Qingshan finally could not help but be shocked. What is this? How could Xianxia and Wuxia explain? He roared, "It's time for you to die." Vajra Strength Talisman. Once used, it's as if there's a Vajra protecting your body, giving you infinite strength. Oxen appeared out of nowhere and explained indifferently. A bull that could talk. Xianxia and Wuxia was instantly stunned. "Brother Bull, why are you here?" Oxen said, "Hurry up and kill him, we still have important matters to attend to." Alright. Li Qingshan grabbed the remaining armor on his body and tore it off. He strode toward Xianxia and Wuxia. "What Vajra protection? Watch me break your turtle shell." Xianxia and Wuxia's fan-sized palm slammed down, thinking that Li Qingshan was seeking his own death. The true qi in Li Qingshan's body surged violently. Ox demon fist of great strength struck out with all his strength. The fist and palm collided, and a loud sound rang out. Under Li Qingshan's feet, the ground collapsed, and the rocks shattered. All the bones in his body groaned in pain, and his muscles became numb. However, he did not care and shouted, "Again!" He punched out again. Boom! The giant palm slammed down, and Li Qingshan sank a few more inches into the ground. Xianxia and Wuxia wanted to smash Li Qingshan into pieces, but Li Qingshan was like a piece of pig iron. No matter how many times he tempered him, he became more and more courageous. The fist and palm clashed more than 10 times, and Li Qingshan's calves were all buried in the ground. Blood seeped out of his mouth and nose, but his expression became more and more determined. Xianxia and Wuxia was, after all, borrowing external force. Although he had infinite strength, his speed of recovery could not keep up. Finally, he revealed an opening. How could Li Qingshan let go of this opportunity? He punched out again, but it was once again dissolved by the spirit light. "It's useless, you can't hurt me." Xianxia and Wuxia laughed wildly. "Let's see how many punches you can block." Li Qingshan did not give his opponent any time to breathe. His true qi exploded, and he continued to punch out more than 10 times. The spirit light trembled and became fainter. Xianxia and Wuxia retreated, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. Clearly, the spirit light could not completely dissolve the fist force, and his lungs were injured. Xianxia and Wuxia was beaten until he knelt on one knee. He angrily and unwillingly said, "You." That. Li Qingshan pulled out the flying dragon sword on his back and poured all of his true qi into it. The sword vibrated, and a foot-long sword ray appeared. He slashed down with all his strength, cutting into the spirit light. After a moment of hesitation, it smoothly cut down. A head fell to the ground, and it spun a few times. There was still shock and fear on its face. Li Qingshan raised the sword and said, "The Black Wind Stronghold's leader has been beheaded. The Black Wind Stronghold has been destroyed." Then he flicked the sword. What a good sword! He did not use this sword from the start, but first used his fists to consume the spirit light of the talisman. Otherwise, when the spirit light was at its peak, not only would he not be able to kill Xianxia and Wuxia, but he would also destroy the sword. Although according to Oxen, this was also a fake spirit weapon that did not make the grade, at least it was more practical. "Brother Nyo, what is the important matter you mentioned?" Chapter 59. Only then did Li Qingshan remember what Oxen had said. Using beast blood was only a temporary measure to cultivate the path of white bone and great beauty. If he truly wanted to cultivate it, he needed human blood, and it had to be human blood that had just died and was still warm. The stronger the blood, the better. These bandits were great materials that Oxen had mentioned. Although he did not dare to agree, he did not mind it too much. He moved the corpses of the bandits over and piled them up into a small mountain on the empty ground. The scene was horrifying, and the stench of blood was thick and pungent. Even Li Qingshan himself felt rather shaken. He could not help but ask himself, "Did I do this?" However, he immediately calmed down. This was karma. If these bandits did not end up like this, then the world would be unfair. As long as he had a clear conscience, there was no need for him to feel conflicted or regret. Afterwards, he followed Oxen's instructions and placed the jar containing Little Anne's white bones upside down on the mountain of corpses. Little Anne danced around nervously until he heard Li Qingshan say, "Go." He turned into a breeze and dove into the jar. The mountain of corpses trembled. The blood that had been flowing downwards suddenly began to flow backwards towards the jar. The jar also began to tremble violently, and the stench of blood grew fainter and fainter. After a long while, there was a series of cracking sounds. Cracks appeared on the jar, revealing streaks of red light, as if they were congealing blood. Li Qingshan frowned and held his breath. The scene before him seemed too much like some kind of terrifying and evil ritual. It was as if some kind of demon was about to be born. With a bang, the jar exploded. A blood-red skeleton sat on the mountain of corpses. 2 balls of blood-red flames burned in its eye sockets. It was clearly an extremely strange and terrifying scene, but the little skeleton's hands were pressed together like an old monk sitting in meditation. It actually gave off a holy feeling of enlightenment, as if it had seen through life and death. The horrifying mountain of corpses vaguely seemed like a lotus throne where a Buddha sat in meditation. The pale white arms that stretched out were like pure white lotus petals. It was extremely strange. Li Qingshan called out tentatively, "Little Anne?" The little skeleton raised its head and the blood flames flickered. It turned into a blood shadow and pounced over. Its speed was so fast that even Li Qingshan was taken aback. This was even faster than Yang Anji's lightness skills. He instinctively wanted to block or even counterattack, but he stopped himself and allowed the little skeleton to barge into his arms. It then slammed into his chest with a thud and slid down. Li Qingshan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He saw that Little Anne had fallen to the ground and was shaking her head. She looked like she couldn't control her speed at all. Little Anne stood up and looked up at Li Qingshan. From his eyes, he saw his current appearance. It was as if he suddenly realized that he was no longer a ghost. He looked down at his tiny, bony hands, and then at his body. Then he began to tremble violently. Then he squatted on the ground and covered his face with his hands. Although there wasn't any sound coming out, Li Qingshan could clearly feel that he was crying. As a ghost, at least he still had a human form. No one would be able to remain calm after turning into such a horrifying, inhuman appearance. Not to mention that he was just a child. Li Qingshan felt a pain in his heart. His heart that was as hard as iron in the massacre suddenly softened. He rubbed his sour nose and squatted down with a smile. He touched Little Anne's head and said, "Why are you like this? Aren't you pretty cute? In the past, only you could touch me, and I couldn't touch you. Now it's fair." Little Anne raised his head. The blood flames in his eye sockets were a little brighter. He stretched out his arms and gently hugged Li Qingshan. He put his head on Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan spread out his arms and hugged him tightly. In the wind and snow, under the mountain of corpses, a teenager and a small skeleton were hugging each other. They seemed to feel a kind of warmth from each other's cold bodies. Oxen looked on silently from the side. There was no longer the usual mocking look in his eyes. Little Anne had the temperament of a child after all. His mood quickly improved. He curiously experimented with his new body. One moment he would randomly walk on the ground. The next moment, he would pick up a single blade that the bandits had dropped and swing it wildly. Sometimes, he would leap several feet into the air, but inevitably he would fall down with a thud and fall to the ground. Li Qingshan was greatly alarmed. He was afraid that Little Anne would fall and shatter his slender bones. However, he saw Little Anne turn over and stand up. Scratching his head, he remembered that he was no longer a ghost and couldn't fly. However, he wasn't disappointed and continued to run wildly in the wind and snow. Only then did Li Qingshan relax. He revealed a smile. Perhaps it was because he loved the house and its crow, he really didn't think that little and was scary. The little skeleton's various childish movements actually had a strange kind of cuteness. However, other people definitely wouldn't think so. He turned to Oxen and asked, "Is little and going to be like this for the rest of his life?" Oxen said, "There's nothing wrong with this. How many people pray to the gods and Buddha to become like this, yet they still can't? However, allowing a yin spirit to cultivate a physical body is something that normal people can forget about. Although it's an ability of the demonic path, it isn't countered by any Buddhist or Taoist arts. Moreover, it progresses at a godly speed and is extraordinarily powerful. If this ability were to spread, I guarantee that it would be 10,000 times more effective than the spiritual ginseng in your possession. Whether it's Buddhists, Taoists, or demons, they would all come to steal it. If someone else gave you a feast, could you still blame the cutlery for not being good?" Li Qingshan could only smile bitterly. "I knew it. The path of white bone and great beauty sounds much more powerful than the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers." Not only was it so fast that he almost failed to react to it, but when he turned around he saw Little and swinging the 7th boss's huge metal hammer that weighed around 50 kilograms. Then, due to his hands being too small, he lost his grip on the handle. The metal hammer flew several dozen meters away and crashed into a wall. The current Little and could slaughter the entire Black Wind stronghold alone. He would definitely be able to do so with even more ease than Li Qingshan. Moreover, the master of the Black Wind stronghold had somehow found a talisman that could contend against his strength of 1 ox. For a bandit leader like him to obtain it, it definitely could not be anything impressive. He could not help but feel a hint of doubt towards the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers. He absorbed the essence blood of over 100 people, so of course he's not weak. If he wants to revert to human form, it's actually not difficult. Oxen snickered and changed the topic, ignoring Li Qingshan's doubts. As expected, Li Qingshan threw his own matters to the back of his mind. "Is that true? What should I do?" Oxen said, "Firstly, once you cultivate the path of white bone and great beauty to a certain level, you'll be able to transform into anything. You'll be able to transform into anything you want." Li Qingshan nodded. The Buddhists speak of skeletons made of powder. They've always been able to see through reality and illusion, but this probably isn't something that can be achieved in a short period of time. After all, it's an illusion. Oxen said, "There's another shortcut. That's by using the blood of others. Before long, you'll be able to regrow flesh from white bones, regrow flesh, and reconstruct a physical body." Li Qingshan said in shock, "Doesn't that mean Little and has come back to life?" Oxen shook his head. "He's neither alive nor dead, neither dead nor alive, but from a mortal's point of view, there's no difference from coming back to life." "All right." Li Qingshan felt excited. "Don't celebrate too early. You'll have to handle this troublesome matter. You can't expose him before everyone and leave behind too many traces. Otherwise, don't blame me for not warning you when people come knocking on your door to purge demons." Chapter 60. Oxen said nothing more. Only when Li Qingshan turned around did he say, "You can practice the tiger demon's fist of bone forging once you get back. Training an ox without training a tiger still isn't an ability." Li Qingshan paused, but he did not stop. No matter where this path led to, he would continue onwards without looking back. It was for himself, as well as for the child in front of him. Oxen placed all of his attention on Li Qingshan. He had taught Little and the path of white bone and great beauty because of Li Qingshan. Was the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers he had taught Li Qingshan really just a clumsy, mediocre ability? Li Qingshan searched through the Black Wind stronghold for spoils of war. Little and followed behind him with a series of thuds. Very soon he found a granary. The granary was filled with food that had been plundered from various villages, prepared for winter. Who knew how many people had died of hunger and cold? Afterwards, he found a warehouse filled with various miscellaneous items, as well as an armory. The warehouse was mostly filled with things like alcohol, meat, salt, and so on. The armory was filled with regular weapons, and none of them were on par with the soaring dragon sword in his hand, so he did not take them seriously. However, he was unable to find the most important treasury no matter how he searched. Instead, he found quite a lot of silver and banknotes in the rooms of the various bosses. The Black Wind stronghold had been in Xinjiang for many years, so who knew how much gold and silver they had accumulated? There might even be talismans among them. In the end, it was Little and who was more meticulous. He discovered an extremely well-hidden mechanism in Xianxia Wu's bedroom. Activating the mechanism, a secret door appeared. Opening the secret door, the gold and silver utensils shone with jewels, almost dazzling him. A wooden box contained a stack of silver banknotes, which amounted to over 10,000 taels. However, the most valuable items were probably the paintings and antiques that he could not name. Even Li Qingshan felt rather dazzled. He casually picked up an item, yet he would spend half a day admiring and fiddling with it, highlighting his true colors of a country bumpkin. Even with his 2 lives combined, he had never seen so much gold and silver. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the other talisman after searching for a while. He thought that if Xiangu really had such a good thing, he would have kept it with him as a trump card. He wouldn't have left it in such a place to rot. He couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Little and didn't care about the gold, silver, and jewelry, as if he was tired of playing with weapons. Instead, he took out the paintings from the big porcelain bottle in the corner of the treasury and looked at them. However, he didn't look like he was playing with them. Instead, he looked at them seriously. Some of the scrolls were just thrown to the ground after a single glance, as if they were fakes. Li Qingshan went up, but he saw that the paintings were either elegant landscapes, flowers, birds, and people, or they were written in some strange calligraphy style. He couldn't understand 9 out of 10 words. In any case, they were all ancient, and he couldn't tell the difference. Suddenly, he remembered that he was basically illiterate in this world. There was no chance for him to learn in the mountain village, nor was there a need for him to learn. He probably couldn't even recognize all the words. He would have to make up for this when he had the chance. However, he was very surprised. "You can understand them?" Little and nodded. Although he couldn't speak, he gestured at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan understood very quickly. As it turned out, Little and had remembered many things after he achieved initial mastery of the path of white bone and great beauty and turned into a skeleton. Li Qingshan clicked his tongue and said, "Looks like you might be able to remember where your home is very soon. You can appreciate paintings at such a young age, so you must have a very profound family background. Perhaps you're not from an ordinary wealthy family." Hearing Li Qingshan say that, Little and became confused instead. Even though he was naive, he knew that his current appearance was shameful. Even if he could find his way back to his home, would he be able to see his family? Li Qingshan comforted him. "Don't worry, I have a way. You'll be fine very soon. I guarantee that you'll be no different from other children." Little and immediately became happy. Although he had no idea what Li Qingshan's method was, he trusted him instinctively. Hearing this from outside, Oxen was surprised. This was not just from an ordinary wealthy family. This little ghost's soul had clearly been cleansed and strengthened by someone's power, which was why it was so tough. He was able to withstand the witch's random refinement, and his soul did not disperse. Instead, he had the ability to control objects. Perhaps Li Qingshan did not know, but Oxen knew very well just how high the path of white bone and great beauty demanded in terms of talent. Even he was rather surprised that Little and was able to grasp it so smoothly. This was probably not just because he was talented, but because he had used some sort of spiritual medicine or technique to awaken his spiritual intelligence. Little and unfurled another scroll painting, and a spiritual light suddenly rose up in the room, overshadowing the brilliance of all the gold, silver, and jewels. Li Qingshan felt a chill in his heart. He sensed an extremely sharp sword qi assaulting him. It was actually 10 times more terrifying than when he faced Yang Anji's fatal strike in the restaurant. He instinctively grabbed Little and pulled him behind him. The scroll painting fell to the ground, but it did not unleash the terrifying attack he had imagined. After resting for a moment, Li Qingshan carefully picked up the scroll, only to find that it was not a painting but calligraphy. The calligraphy was extremely messy, and he could not even recognize a single word. It did not really look like cursive calligraphy. There were no characters in the entire scroll, only random strokes and strokes. However, the force of the strokes penetrated the back of the paper, making it look extremely imposing. Every single stroke was like a sword mark left behind by a supreme swordsman on a stone wall. There was a depth to it that would not be worn away even with the passage of time. Oxen said, "Kid, you're quite lucky. You actually found a true spiritual artifact." A spiritual artifact. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. He played with the scroll painting in his hand, his heart filled with joy. He rubbed little Anne's bony head. "What a good little Anne." Little Anne saw that he was happy, and also lowered his head in joy. "How do I use this thing?" Oxen said, "Try injecting your true qi into it." Li Qingshan had fought a great battle in the Black Wind stronghold. He had mainly relied on his own strength, so he did not consume much of his true qi. He still had more than half of it left. However, when he tried to inject his true qi into the scroll painting, the true qi in his body poured out like crazy, and all his true qi was sucked into the scroll painting. When his true qi was completely depleted, a stroke on the scroll just now lit up. With a flash of light, a skimming flew out, passing through a gold and silver treasure chest, and landed on the stone wall of the secret room. There was no shocking sound. After a while, the treasure chest split into two. Only then did Li Qingshan come back to his senses. He went forward to take a look, and saw that as long as the skimming passed by the gold and silver ingots, they would all be cut in half. The cut surface was clean and shiny. He then went to check the stone wall, and found that there was an extremely thin and deep mark on the thick stone wall. Chapter 61. Li Qingshan finally understood why Oxen didn't like the shining knife, and even disdained the flying dragon sword, which was regarded as a godly weapon by ordinary people. Compared with real spiritual weapons, they were indeed inferior. If Xianxia and Wuxia used this spiritual weapon, he would be the one who died here today. However, ordinary martial artists would not be able to see this spiritual light. The antique calligraphy and paintings here were not collected by Xianxia and Wuxia, that uncouth man. Instead, it was the second boss who was dressed like a scholar. He could see that this calligraphy was somewhat extraordinary, but he could not tell what was so extraordinary about it. Even if he could see it, ordinary martial artists couldn't use spiritual weapons with their internal energy. Xianxia and Wuxia had to bite his tongue and use his blood to activate the magic charms. Once the scroll was rolled up, it didn't show any light, which benefited Li Qingshan. Oxen said, "It seems that this spiritual weapon is not complete, but only a part." Li Qingshan took a look. Indeed, many strokes were broken at the edge of the paper, as if they were cut by someone. Oxen had a good eye. This spiritual weapon doesn't seem to be made on purpose, but more like it was drawn randomly. The sword qi and sword momentum were integrated into the tip of the brush to stimulate the sword qi. If you want to, you might be able to learn a sword art from it. Also, once a spiritual weapon is cut, it will be destroyed. The person who wrote this calligraphy is really something. Li Qingshan knew Oxen's temperament very well. He was always arrogant, so saying something was already a great comment. Li Qingshan looked at the calligraphy more carefully, trying to learn a sword art from it. He thought that since Sherpadian, as an illiterate, could understand the Ode to the Gallant, which even the martial artists couldn't understand, he, as a semi-illiterate, should have some advantage. However, he couldn't find anything. The more he looked, the more he felt it was powerful, so he had to give up. Little and stared at the scroll, and the bloody flame flickered. Suddenly, he picked up a scroll on the ground and waved it in the air. A gust of wind rose in the treasury, and the scroll brought up a series of afterimages, making whooshing sounds in the air. It was as if the scroll in little Anne's hand was not a scroll, but a real sword. The little skeleton holding the scroll and waving it around should have been strange and amusing, but in Li Qingshan's eyes, he could faintly see an elegant swordsman waving his sword around. He couldn't help but murmur, "Fairy tales are all lies. What do you mean by an illiterate learning martial arts faster? It's all nonsense." Oxen glanced at Li Qingshan and clicked his tongue. Comprehension. Li Qingshan didn't think that his comprehension was bad. He had made rapid progress in the ox demon's fist of great strength, and had even been praised by oxen. If it wasn't a problem with him, then it could only be said that Little N's comprehension was really too high. Of course, it might also be because he knew calligraphy. After Little N finished the last move, he resolutely put away his sword. The scroll broke into pieces and turned to dust. Then he looked at Li Qingshan. Although he couldn't even make an expression, the bloody flame was clearly flashing with the emotion of, "Come and praise me." Li Qingshan touched his skull. So smart. Little N immediately became happy. Seeing that Li Qingshan was a little hurt, he wrote on his palm, "I'll teach you." Li Qingshan smiled. "All right then, it seems that I still have a lot to learn. But first, I'll help you find a new home." From the antique vases, he found a thick porcelain jar and weighed it. "It seems too small." Xiaoan split up into pieces again and flew in with a clatter, which made Li Qingshan leap in fright. He glanced into the jar and saw a tiny skull with a pair of blood-red flames staring at him with great interest. Alright, he thought that raising a little ghost was strange enough, but now it seemed to be getting stranger and stranger. He said, "Good night," and sealed the jar. Li Qingshan picked up the jar and stuffed the banknotes into his bosom. He only brought the scroll out. Then he sealed the secret room again. Finally, he found some kerosene. Other than the granary and the warehouse, he sprinkled it on every camp and started a big fire. Since ancient times, killing and arson were always linked together. Even in the wind and snow, the fire quickly spread. In the blink of an eye, it had become a huge fire, causing Li Qingshan's face to turn red. Li Qingshan then sprinkled the kerosene on the mountain of corpses. No one knew if these corpses, which had their essence blood sucked out by Little N, would be noticed by others. So he decided to just burn them as well. On the mountain path, after a difficult night of marching, the bandit hunting squad finally neared the Black Wind stronghold. Just when Huang Bingo thought it was too late, a red light suddenly shone from the horizon. He was shocked. Could it be? He immediately ordered, "Hurry up." After crossing a mountain ridge, Huang Bingo was stunned. Lu Hong was also stunned. Even the people who had rushed to the mountain ridge with them were speechless. The insufferably arrogant and infamous Black Wind stronghold was currently burning, turning into a sea of fire. Could it be that this was all done by that person? This question arose in everyone's hearts. After recovering from their shock, the squad charged down the mountain ridge at their fastest speed. They arrived in front of the Black Wind stronghold and hesitantly passed through the broken stronghold gate. Then, they saw a scene that they would never be able to forget for the rest of their lives. Within the sea of fire, the snow on the plaza was dyed bright red by blood and flames. All sorts of broken weapons were stabbed into the ground. Li Qingshan sat in the center, repairing himself. Behind him was a mountain of burning corpses. 400 to 500 people stopped. Huang Bingu and Lu Hong were no exception. This youth exuded an aura that made people not dare to approach him, as if he was a demon god. Li Qingshan opened his eyes. "You're here." 2 balls of fire were reflected in his clear eyes, but it made people feel as if the fire had been ignited from the bottom of his heart. No one answered him. Li Qingshan had killed people, set fires, and tested arcane artifacts. He had completely depleted all of his physical strength and true qi. As soon as he sat down, he felt a deep sense of exhaustion, so he just meditated and rested. Within the sea of fire, the best place for him to rest was this empty space. Even he had never thought he would give others such an impact. As a regular person, Yidichuan did not understand as much as Huang Bingu and Lu Hong. He went up and asked, "Ti, did you do all of this?" However, he never dared to look at the mountain of corpses behind Li Qingshan the entire time. The scorching sensation and the smell of roasted meat made him dizzy. Li Qingshan nodded and leapt up. "Li Qingshan has destroyed the Black Wind stronghold here. I have fulfilled my promise to the people of Crouching Ox Village, to Sir, and to myself." Huang Bingu and Lu Hong, on the other hand, noticed the crossbows among the scattered weapons. They understood the terror of these things the best. Just what kind of martial arts gave him such strength? Lu Hong knew he could not do what Li Qingshan had done. Even if the bandits did not move at all and lined up for him to hit, he would still be exhausted, not to mention that the bandits wielded various weapons and had many masters watching over them. Chapter 62. Thank you, everyone, for your assistance. Li Qingshan thanked Yi Dechuan, Huang Binggu, and Lu Hong one by one. No matter what their motives were, help was help, and their reward was the remaining granaries, warehouses, and armory of the Black Wind stronghold. As for the treasury, it had always been well hidden. With the fire, even the secret door had been destroyed. If they wanted to enter again, they could only move the rubble, find the right position, and force their way in. Everyone in the bandit hunting army was beaming with joy and sighed in relief. They had originally been worried, thinking that they would have to fight the Black Wind Mountain bandits to the death. Now, they could move the spoils of war without a drop of blood on their swords. It was great. They could even brag to others when they returned. Yi Dechuan, Huang Binggu, Lu Hong, and Li Qingshan stood together and watched everyone move the items. Li Qingshan seemed to be the leader. Other than the wine gourd at his waist and the flying dragon sword on his back, Li Qingshan also had a new porcelain jar at his waist and a painting scroll on his back. Naturally, the porcelain jar contained little and he had absorbed the essence blood of so many bandits in one go, so he needed some time to digest and absorb it. As for the painting scroll, it was a spirit artifact he had obtained. Because it was calligraphy and could emit sword chi, he named it the cursive sword calligraphy. These two items attracted the attention of the other three, but he did not say, and no one tactfully asked. No matter what it was his spoils of war, and he could not allow others to touch it. Li Qingshan said, Chief Hunting's injuries are not serious, right? Huang Binggu said, Don't worry, my blade is accurate. There won't be any injuries. Li Qingshan was startled, and then he laughed loudly. As expected of an experienced person. The human heart was complicated. It was moved by emotions and changed by benefits. There was falsehood in the truth and truth in the falsehood. Right and wrong, gratitude and grudges could not be calculated, and there was no need to. With a smile, all gratitude and grudges were forgotten. Huang Binggu also laughed loudly, but he suddenly withdrew his smile. But the difficult part is yet to come. Little Black walked up and bowed deeply to this person who was about the same age as him. I've let you down. Today's scene had thoroughly shocked him. If such a person became an enemy of the Drawn Rains village, how terrifying would that be? Li Qingshan patted his shoulder and walked out of Black Wind's stronghold. It's almost daybreak. Beyond the layers of red clouds, a bright light appeared in the east, and the fire was gradually extinguished. Li Qingshan suddenly stopped in his tracks. By the way, hunting chief, did the nickname Descended Tiger come from you? Maybe? Huang Binggu did not expect him to say this. Li Qingshan said, Can you change it? Huang Binggu was startled, then smiled bitterly. This kind of name was spread among the people of the Jianghu. He had merely happened to be there, so how could he have the right to change it? Li Qingshan didn't know that he would soon have a new title. Black Tiger Li Qingshan. Yi Dechuan felt a deep regret at not being able to find the treasury of the Black Wind stronghold in the end, but he did not show it on his face. Occasionally, his gaze would meet the advisors, and they were both excited and overjoyed. A great merit, a great merit. Even though it was Li Qingshan's doing, Li Qingshan was the constable he had found, so he, as the county magistrate, could not miss out on the credit. He was already imagining the expression of his cheap brother-in-law, who looked down on him when he received the news. The Black Wind stronghold that several county magistrates could not quell was quelled by me as soon as I took office. Yi Dechuan laughed wildly and patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. Of course, this is all thanks to you, Constable Li. I will definitely report this to the magistrate, who is my brother-in-law, to commend you for your contributions and help you get promoted and rich. Constable Li? Li Qingshan only just remembered that he had this title. He smiled and said, Thank you, Lord Yi, for your praise. Not a problem, not a problem. The army set off to return to the city. Li Qingshan had nothing to do, so he followed the army slowly. Along the way, everyone discovered that he was not as terrifying as they had imagined him to be. They gradually gathered around him, calling him Constable and Young Hero. Even Li Qingshan, who had never experienced such treatment before, felt extremely satisfied. Compared to his mediocrity in his past life, the Crouching Ox village was in dire straits. This was what a good man should be like. He definitely did not pretend to be aloof or be indifferent to fame and fortune. Not only did he love fame and fortune, but he also loved wine, meat, and beauties. He had everything in the world. Huang Bingge bid farewell and returned to the Drawn Reins village to retrieve the tiger bone alcohol that Li Qingshan wanted. Li Qingshan said, "If you have any ginseng, feel free to send it over. I'm willing to buy it for a high price." After dealing with this matter, he could truly begin practicing the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. Although Oxen was very secretive about it, Li Qingshan could sense that this ordinary-looking ability contained mysteries that he had yet to comprehend. And even if it really was just an ordinary ability, it was not something that any martial arts could compare to. It was extremely important to him. Although he was greedy for fame and fortune, he wasn't blinded by it. Tao Taran had forgotten where he was. The current prosperity was just the calm before the storm. There were more and bigger challenges ahead. If he didn't prepare in advance, he would be defeated. However, not only did he not feel fear, but he even became slightly excited. He was just short of yelling for the storm to come even fiercer. This was the life that he had chosen. Although the roads were easy to travel during the day, they were unable to move quickly because they were carrying a great pile of supplies. Only when evening arrived did the group arrive at the city gates of Qingyang City. Just now, did they hear the deafening sound of gongs and firecrackers. Li Qingshan asked, "Is there a festival today?" Lu Hong said, "No, it must be to welcome you. The district magistrate has sent people back to report this beforehand." Sure enough, as soon as they entered the city, a warm aura flooded their faces. Despite it being winter, the streets were packed with people. What had happened in Qingyang City last night had shocked everyone in the city. As a result, everyone had been rather absent-minded during the day. Only when the news arrived did the entire city erupt into an uproar. Li Qingshan smiled and welcomed the crowd. At the same time, he could clearly sense a few hostile gazes from the tea house on the side of the street. He thought, "They've come so quickly. Frogs at the bottom of a well. We've just destroyed a stronghold. Senior brother, when do we do it?" In the tea house, a woman in blue with a plain appearance but brimming with arrogance said, "There's no hurry. Let's wait a little longer." The senior brother who sat before her was a horse-faced man in his 30s. He was in his 30s, but his fingers were long and slender. His waist bulged and his eyes shone brightly. He could tell with a single glance that he was a master of hidden weapons with great inner force. "We've made it just in time. If the news spreads, who knows how many people will come to steal it? Why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? I don't think I can kill 200 bandits by myself. The descended tiger is in full swing right now, so he'll be difficult to deal with." The horse-faced man shook his head. They had only managed to come across this opportunity in Qingyang City, so they wanted to take advantage of it. Chapter 63. It's better to be cautious in the Jianghu. It's better not to get the spiritual ginseng than to put yourself in danger. There are other people here, let them test the waters first. The long-faced man's earnest advice only made the lady in blue look down on him. "Master said that you have to listen to me when you're outside." The long-faced man was also angry. "If you want to die, go ahead. Don't drag me down. If you're not Master's daughter, I would have left long ago." He was deeply aware of the dangers of the Jianghu. If he was not careful, even if he managed to get the spiritual ginseng, he would probably be killed. If Li Qingshan was a clever person, he would immediately offer up the spiritual ginseng, or he would be dead for sure. No, even if he did offer it up, the person who received it would definitely silence him to prevent the news from leaking out and being hunted down by everyone. The long-faced man looked at Li Qingshan in the crowd as if he was looking at a dead man. He took a sip of tea. Even if he couldn't get the spiritual ginseng, it would be a wonderful thing to see such a lucky young talent die in the dangerous Jianghu. It was the restaurant where the intense battle had taken place last night again. Li Qingshan sat in the seat of honor, receiving the fearful gazes of the aristocrats and cup after cup of fine alcohol. When he drank a cup, he suddenly stopped and looked at the rippling alcohol in the cup. Following his movement, the restaurant quietened down. An aristocrat asked carefully, "Arrestor Li, what's wrong?" Li Qingshan said lightly, "This wine is poisoned." He casually poured the wine on the ground. White smoke immediately rose, showing the intensity of the poison. This poison was colorless and odorless. If he hadn't activated his spiritual eyes and been careful enough to see the strangeness in the wine, he would have been poisoned by now. The aristocrat's face turned pale. He was the one who poured the wine for Li Qingshan just now. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "It wasn't me." Li Qingshan suddenly stood up. When the aristocrat was about to cry for help, he saw Li Qingshan look at the waiter at the side. "You're the one who poisoned it, right?" This was almost beast-like intuition, a sensitive reaction to killing intent and hostility. "I don't think I've seen him before. He's not the waiter here," an aristocrat said. The waiter panicked and cried out for his innocence. Suddenly, he saw a fist hurtling towards him. Before the fist had even arrived, the gust of wind from it had already rushed over, suffocating him. He could no longer afford to hide anymore. A dagger slid out of his sleeve and stabbed towards Li Qingshan's abdomen viciously. With a dull thud, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking, the waiter's chest caved in. His body flew out of the building and landed on the street. He still held the knife tightly, its tip bent. Li Qingshan behaved as if nothing had happened. He turned around and said, "Let's keep drinking." He knew this was not even an appetizer. But no one could drink. Li Qingshan said, "Sir Yi, the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yang Anji, has publicly assaulted and killed an official, and he's now fled. Have you issued a warrant for his arrest?" Yi Dachuan said, "Yes. Yes. I will definitely mention this in the official document I send to the prefect. We cannot stay for long in a den of bandits like the Dragon's Gate sect. As a constable, I am willing to wipe out the Dragon's Gate sect and capture Yang Anji. What do you think, Lord Master?" The aristocrats were horrified. The Dragon's Gate sect was probably going to follow in the footsteps of the Black Wind stronghold. Fortunately, most of them had summoned their descendants back as soon as possible. Yi Dachuan looked at the sky and said, "Is it too late?" Li Qingshan said, "Thank you for your concern, Lord Master. I'll be back soon." Since he could not drink, he would find something to do. He would not let the culprit behind all this go, the Dragon's Gate sect. He would not give his enemies a chance to rest and recuperate. Comrade Lei Feng had once taught us to treat our comrades as warm as spring and our enemies as cruel and merciless as winter. The Dragon's Gate sect sat on the Dragon's Gate mountain 5 kilometers away from the city. When Li Qingshan left the city gates, he did not take the main road. Instead, he made his way up the Dragon's Gate in a hurry. As soon as he made it out of the city gates, 2 black figures tailed him, but they were not the senior brother and junior sister. They just happened to be in the vicinity of Qingyang City and had heard the news of the spiritual ginseng. The waiter who had poisoned the spiritual ginseng happened to be their companion. He had been waiting below the restaurant the entire time, waiting to poison Li Qingshan to death and flee immediately after obtaining the spiritual ginseng. If they failed, the 3 of them would take action together. However, all they saw was the waiter's corpse being tossed out. Afterwards, Li Qingshan leapt out of the window as well, heading straight out of the city. They looked at one another. "He's escaping." They could not help but follow him. Although the straight line distance was 5 kilometers, he had to traverse mountains and ridges along the way, so it was not a measly 5 kilometers. Li Qingshan strode forward, leaving behind a deep footprint with each step. When he came across ditches and ridges, he would slow down and stop for a moment. As it seemed, there was a reason why people described him as clumsy and heavy. This was because the ox demon's fist of great strength focused on practicing the body, not qi. It did not have any techniques to lighten the body or lift qi at all. He only channeled true qi into his feet instinctively when he ran, allowing him to move slightly faster. But at this moment, his situation was a little special. His spine was twisted in a strange way, and he kept adjusting his body as he ran, as if he was stretching his waist. His neck was also constantly twisting, and he was also panting heavily. His heart was beating like a drum, and white steam rose from his body, but it was actually his sweat. Running should have been effortless for him, but he actually felt like he was bearing a great burden. However, his footsteps became faster and faster. With each step, he seemed more graceful. His body bent forward as his arms drooped down. He was like a humanoid wild beast, running through the forest faster and faster. In the pitch-black forest, the trees rapidly approached him before being quickly thrown behind again. Suddenly, a precipitous hill that stood 20 to 30 meters tall appeared before him. If it were him in the past, he definitely would have stopped and thought about how he could make his way around it or climb up. But now, not only did he not stop, but he even sped up towards the hill. As soon as he reached the bottom of the hill, he lowered his body and pushed off with his feet, leaping up. He extended his hands and grabbed 2 protruding rocks. With another push, he leapt up the hill. The entire movement was completed in a single stroke, just like a vicious tiger scaling a mountain. This form was the tiger demon climbs the mountain from the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. Oxen had already passed on the tiger demon's fist of bone forging to Li Qingshan. He had spent the entire time on his way back to Qingyang City studying it. With the accumulation from the ox demon's fist of great strength, it was much easier. He grasped the method very quickly and experimented with it as he ran. These were the 3 most basic forms of the 9 forms of the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. The tiger demon flexes its spine, the tiger demon stretches its back, and the tiger demon bumps its head. These were the foundations of the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. The other forms used them as a foundation. Chapter 64. However, increasing the burden on his body wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it was a great thing. Although Ox Demon's fist of great strength bestowed extraordinary strength, endurance, and defensive abilities, he often felt that it was a waste. His strength was great, but if he wasn't fast enough, it would be useless if he couldn't land a hit. That was why he had no choice but to take the risk when dealing with Yang Anji. With greater endurance, he could hold out for longer, but in a life-and-death battle, it was all about the speed of a spark and myriad changes in the blink of an eye. If he didn't land a hit, he would flee 1,000 miles away. There weren't many opportunities to fight for 3 days and 3 nights. With a strong defense, he could bully experts who used their fists, but if he used a sword or sharp blade, he might not be able to withstand the so-called needle-pricking cowhide. Moreover, it was better to hit someone than to take a beating. However, Tiger Demon's fist of bone forging solved these problems from the root. It allowed him to explode his strength and stamina in an instant, greatly increasing his speed. Other than Tiger Demon climbs the mountain, there were 2 other forms of Tiger Demon's fist of bone forging. Tiger Demon leaps over the ravine and Tiger Demon descends the mountain. They contained all the movements of leaping up and down, pouncing forward and retreating. It was truly like a ferocious tiger passing through the forest, coming and going like the wind. Li Qingshan stopped in his tracks and let his wildly beating heart slowly calm down. He closed his eyes and tried to comprehend the feeling of just now. At the same time, he was also waiting. The 2 black figures' qigong was actually quite good. After a while, they walked out of the forest. Using the bright snowy light, they immediately saw Li Qingshan on the hillside. At the same time, they felt a fierce and dangerous aura. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed. "You're just 2 third-rate masters, yet you're bold enough to chase after me. How bold of you! Since you've come, then leave your lives behind." Before the 2 of them could reply, he immediately shifted from stillness to lunge down. Tiger Demon descends the mountain. The descended tiger, Li Qingshan. However, the 2 of them remembered Li Qingshan's nickname at the same time. Not only did Li Qingshan find this nickname unpleasant, but even they found it hilariously tacky when they first heard it. However, when the shadow approached them, neither of them could laugh. They hated themselves for believing in the rumors and getting greedy. They didn't expect Li Qingshan, a fledgling, to be so strong. Yang Anji released the news of the spiritual ginseng, but he definitely wouldn't mention the scandal of him being played mahjong. As for the matter of Li Qingshan destroying the Black Wind stronghold by himself, because it was too bizarre, they didn't believe it either. They only saw Li Qingshan return to the city with 2 famous experts and several hundred people. It was already too late to escape. Tiger Demon steals heart. Li Qingshan's hands formed claws and pierced into their chests. With a grab and pull, he pulled out 2 blood-red hearts that were still beating. In addition to the 3 basic moves of strength training, Tiger Demon flexes its spine, Tiger Demon stretches its waist, and Tiger Demon touches its head. There were also the 3 sweeping moves of Tiger Demon leaps over the ravine, Tiger Demon climbs the mountain, and Tiger Demon descends the mountain. The Tiger Demon Fist of Bone Forging also had 3 moves that were purely used to kill and injure. They were Tiger Demon steals heart, Tiger Demon rips the goat, and Tiger Demon roars. It was several times more ferocious than the Ox Demon Fist of great strength. Little and come. The porcelain jar opened and Little and flew out. The blood color on his body had faded, leaving behind only a layer of red. He had basically returned to the appearance of a white skeleton. Li Qingshan clenched his fist. Blood dripped onto the white bones and instantly seeped in. This was the so-called blood of a living person. Such a cultivation method was evil and terrifying to the extreme. However, Li Qingshan didn't feel the slightest discomfort. It wasn't just because these 2 people wanted to harm him and there was nothing wrong with killing them. He smelled the thick stench of blood and a cruel delight surged from the bottom of his heart. The red light in the depths of his eyes also became more and more dazzling. In the eyes of mortals, oxen had always been relatively honest and docile creatures. Although they had their moments of violence, they couldn't compare to tigers that hunted for food. It was the same for the fist techniques named after these 2 beasts. If the Ox Demon Fist of great strength had only strengthened his bloodlust, then the Tiger Demon Fist of Bone Forging had completely stimulated the murderous nature in his heart. Those who were good at fighting liked to fight, and those who were good at killing liked to kill. This was the common sense of the world. Li Qingshan used his blood-stained hand to rub Little An's head and said gently, "Come out and get some fresh air." Although he didn't know how a skeleton could get some fresh air, Little An still happily climbed onto Li Qingshan's shoulder. Li Qingshan took off, but he didn't know that not long after he left, another 2 people rushed over. They were the long-faced man and the woman in blue from the tea house. The 2 of them were experienced in the Jianghu after all. They were not the scions of the Dragon's Gate sect. Even the woman in blue paled slightly when she saw this scene. The 3 Banes of Yao. To think that these 3 pieces of trash would dare set their sights on the spirit ginseng. Senior brother, he left the city to challenge the Dragon's Gate sect. This is a good opportunity for us. Once both sides are heavily injured, we'll be the aureole behind them. We'll take the spirit ginseng and leave. Shut up. The long-faced man squatted down to examine the corpse. When he heard the woman in blue's plan, he cut her off with a livid expression. Let's go. We'll leave now. The further we go, the better. The woman in blue shouted, "What did you say?" Although the 3 Banes of Yao are not impressive figures, they do have some skills. Ignoring the fact that the 3 Banes are skilled in poison, the martial arts of the 1st and 2nd Banes are pretty good. Even if they work together, I would have to put in a lot of effort. However, now that I'm on guard, I can't even withstand a single black tiger steals the heart before my heart was dug out. This Li Qingshan is not someone we can deal with. The rumors of the Black Wind stronghold might be true, the long-faced man said calmly, but his voice trembled slightly. The horse-faced man spoke calmly, but his voice was slightly trembling. He could imagine what would happen if he were to be incited to attack. We're using hidden weapons to launch sneak attacks. Are we supposed to fight him head-on? As long as we use our movement techniques to open up a distance, it will be fine. Senior brother, you're really too cowardly. Riches come from danger. If we obtain the spirit ginseng, the woman in blue chattered on. When she mentioned the spirit ginseng, her eyes lit up. But there was a clear slap. The woman in blue covered her face in disbelief. "You actually dared to hit me?" The long-faced man said, "If you want to die, go by yourself. Don't drag me along. Go back and tell Master. Let's see if Master will punish me or praise me." He swung his hand and left. The woman in blue was stunned for a while, but she still chased after him. "Senior brother, how can you do this?" The Dragon Gate mountain was towering on the ground. The mountain was steep and precipitous. There were cliffs on 3 sides, especially on the east side. It was as if it had been chopped out by an axe. The cliff was several hundred feet high. It was straight up and down. Even monkeys would find it difficult to climb it. However, at this moment, the dark eastern cliff flickered with sparks of fire as it flew up quickly. Chapter 65. After killing the 3 evils of Yao, Li Qingshan rushed through the mountains and forests. There were no longer any obstructions. He crossed the rivers he came across and crossed the ridges he came across. His usage of the tiger demon's fist of bone forging became more and more ingenious. In less than 2 hours he arrived at the cliff to the east of the Dragon's Gate. The mountain stabbed into his face like a sharp sword. He immediately thought about what to do as his body and mind sped up towards the cliff. 300 meters in the air, the wind whistled past his ears, but he ignored it. His eyes were as sharp as needles as he searched the cliff nervously, searching for a rock he could grab onto. Even if it was just an extremely small protrusion, he could use it as leverage. When he ran out of leverage, he would grab onto the cliff viciously. If the cliff was treated as flat ground, then Li Qingshan would be like a huge tiger with his back hunched and 4 limbs on the ground. However, he seemed like he was walking on flat ground, graceful and at ease. Only he knew that he was treading on thin ice, putting himself in danger. The slightest mistake would make him fall from several hundred meters in the air. Even with his body of steel, he would be smashed to pieces. It was no less dangerous than the Black Wind stronghold. However, he was fearless. Instead, his blood surged. The extreme danger had squeezed out all of the potential in his body. His spirit, willpower, and vigor had all reached unprecedented heights. He finally understood where the joy of those mountaineers who risked their lives to scale the highest peaks lay. He understood why there were people who liked extreme sports. To challenge difficulties and obstacles and achieve what others could not achieve had always been the nature and instincts of a hot-blooded man. He ignored the constant signals of exhaustion from his body, and he ignored the groans from his bones that could not hold on any longer. His body overloaded instead brought him the pleasure of releasing his soul, like flying. Suddenly, a valley appeared before him. He leapt as hard as he could, and only when he saw the buildings did he suddenly realize that this was not a valley, but a mountain peak. The world in his head flipped once again. He landed on the cliff on one knee and stood up to look back. The mountains were like beasts. The tiny Qingyang city was surrounded by these beasts as if it was in danger of being ripped to shreds at any time. This was not a world where people could live in peace. It was filled with unimaginable danger. During the decade or so he had spent in the Crouching Ox village, he had grumbled countless times. He missed the comfortable rooms of his past life, where he could eat various foods, and spend an entire day in front of his computer. Even after the appearance of oxen, which could be described as great power, he still hesitated inside. He was comparing the 2 lives. Which one was better? Only tonight did he suddenly get the answer. He cut off the last shred of hesitation and opened his arms as if to embrace the world. This is the life I want. This is the adventurer's paradise. The biting cold wind made the young man's clothes flutter. On this cliff, he made an end to his past life, to the old dream that had haunted him for 15 years. I am Li Qingshan, the Li of Mu Zi, the Li of Li. Where in the world is there not a lush mountain? Little and crawled out of the jar as well. He stared at Li Qingshan blankly. Although he had no idea what he was thinking, he seemed to sense his will. He thought to himself, no matter where you want to go, I will accompany you until the end. Li Qingshan turned around resolutely and made his way towards the buildings and halls. That was where the Dragon's Gate sect stood. It was already quite late, but the soaring dragon hall of the Dragon's Gate sect was still brightly lit. The sect master, Yang Anji, sat in the seat of honor. Beside him was the pale-faced, resentful Yang Jun. The elders and core disciples of the sect stood to the two sides. They were all stern, and none of them said anything. Even the roaring flames could not warm their hearts. The Black Wind stronghold had been destroyed by Li Qingshan. This piece of news weighed on everyone's chests like a boulder. The Dragon's Gate sect was quite impressive. Li Qingshan had only returned to Qingyang City in the evening, but the news had already reached the Dragon's Gate sect in the evening. It was quite fast. Yang Jun roared out with a twisted face, "That's impossible. It must be a rumor. It's only been a day. It's not like the Black Wind stronghold is made of paper. How could they be destroyed?" Jun, stop talking. It's the army of Qingyang City, and there's Lu Hong and Huang Binggu working together too. It's no surprise that the Black Wind stronghold has been destroyed. I just never thought it would be so fast. Yang Anji truly lived up to his reputation as the sect master of a sect. He was still able to maintain some composure after hearing about such a great event. An elder said, "I never thought Lu Hong and Huang Binggu would work together to help that kid." "Senior brother, what do we do now? Many aristocrats have summoned their descendants back." "What do you mean help that kid?" "It's just for the treasures of the Black Wind stronghold. They won't spare the Dragon's Gate sect. This is basically an unprecedented disaster for our Dragon's Gate sect." The Dragon's Gate sect had been established for many years now. Although it had never been a large sect of the Jianghu, it did possess a very deep foundation in Qingyang. Martial arts and influence combined to form an absolute ruling force. Right now, they were like a local tyrant who had been living comfortably, suddenly hearing that the entire world was revolting. They basically felt like the end of the world had arrived. "Senior brother, I've said long ago that we need to restrain our disciples from running amok. If they run amok like this, they'll provoke powerful enemies sooner or later and bring great trouble to our Dragon's Gate sect." Although the disciplinary elders said this to Yang Anji, he was looking at Yang Jun. The others all showed resentment too. "Old bastard, what nonsense are you spouting? Your idiotic son has someone else's wife and daughter come looking for them. Who stood up for them?" Yang Jun was furious. Normally, he would never speak to his seniors like that, but he had suddenly lost his martial arts. Even the Dragon's Gate sect that protected him might not be able to protect him anymore. He had lost his mind, so he no longer cared. "You!" The disciplinary elder's face reddened. "All of you shut up." Yang Anji's voice boomed through the hall. His inner force could not be underestimated. Is now the time for internal strife? No matter what happened in the past, the priority right now is to deal with the crisis before us. I've already sent disciples to guard the mountain path and pass on the news with torches. If someone attacks the mountain en masse, they definitely won't be able to hide from us. If we really can't stop them, we can only retreat through the secret passageway in the ancestral hall with our savings. We'll abandon the Dragon's Gate mountain and preserve our strength. At the end of the day, the Dragon's Gate sect was a sect that had existed for several generations. Apart from the young masters of aristocrats, there were still many loyal disciples who served them. However, these disciples never imagined that their sect master had already made plans to abandon them. Abandon the Dragon's Gate mountain. Everyone in the hall was shocked. They had thought of the worst-case scenario, but when they suddenly heard it, they still struggled to accept it. I'm only talking about the worst-case scenario, and it's only a temporary plan. I've already sent letters to all the members of the Martial Arts Society, both orthodox and evil. Everyone has already learnt about the news of the spiritual ginseng. Before long, Qingyang City will be filled with people of the Jianghu. Not only will the kid be dead, but even Lu Hong and Huang Binggu might die a violent death. As long as we preserve our strength, we'll be able to make a comeback before long. Chapter 66. Yang Anji's expression changed drastically. He had not sensed Li Qingshan's arrival at all. Li Qingshan raised his leg and strode forward. He no longer seemed clumsy. Instead, he was as light and silent as a feline. The other elders and disciples were still wondering who he was. Yang Jun roared, "Li Qingshan!" Everyone in the hall stood up at the same time, pressing down on their swords. There was a flurry of discussion. What are the disciples guarding the mountain doing? How did you get up here? Who else? Get out here. You don't have to worry about how I got up here. I'm the only one here today. Li Qingshan looked around and saw that there were many people he did not know. He said, "I'm only here today to kill the culprit. The rest of you can leave the hall. I'll give you 10 minutes. He turned to the side, making way for the door behind him. However, what he received in response was the sound of swords being drawn. Eerie sword light flickered. The disciplinary hall elder said, "There's a path to heaven, but you chose to barge in instead. To think that you dared to sneak up the mountain alone. Do you really think that our Dragon's Gate sect is a pushover?" He was in charge of punishment and was known for his callousness in the Dragon's Gate sect. He looked at Li Qingshan like he was looking at the disciples who had offended him. "Kill him. He's our Dragon's Gate sect's greatest enemy. If not for him, the Dragon's Gate sect wouldn't be where it is today. How dare he send himself to our doorstep? We can't let him off so easily. I want to chop off all his limbs." Originally, everyone had almost fallen out with each other, but due to the appearance of the culprit, Li Qingshan, they banded together. They wanted to unleash all of their fury on him. They were tempted to cut him to pieces and cut him to pieces. To them, Li Qingshan, who had come alone, was already a piece of meat on the chopping block, ready for them to do as they pleased. Only Yang Anji remained silent. He gripped his sword hilt tightly, sensing the changes in Li Qingshan. Originally, Li Qingshan was like an iron rod. Although it was powerful and heavy, it lacked variation and sharpness. As for the current Li Qingshan, he seemed to have been sharpened and revealed his ability, causing others to raise their eyebrows. Li Qingshan said with a calm expression, "Then, the Dragon's Gate sect will be the next Black Wind stronghold." Killing intent surged in his heart, and his entire body surged with killing chi, pressing towards the people of the Dragon's Gate sect. Such a heavy murderous aura. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts, feeling as if the temperature in the hall had suddenly dropped by a few degrees. Yang Jun, who had been crippled of his martial arts, almost collapsed to the ground. Li Qingshan took advantage of this opportunity and used the tiger demon leaping over the ravine to pounce on the Dragon's Gate disciple closest to him. There was a distance of more than 10 steps between them, and Li Qingshan closed the distance in an instant. He used the tiger demon digs out the heart to swipe at Li Qingshan, and the sound of his 5 fingers tearing through the air was terrifying. Even a lion would use its full strength when hunting a rabbit. It would never rely on its advantage to waste words with its enemy. That disciple had not expected Li Qingshan to suddenly attack. In his shock and fear, he could not even use half of his strength. He could only watch as Li Qingshan's hand reached into his chest and dug out a bloody heart before casually tossing it aside. Shaoan leapt up and caught the heart in his hand, absorbing the heart's blood. Ever since he learned from Li Qingshan that there was a chance for him to recover his body of flesh and blood, he had done this with the attitude of completing a sacred ceremony. 2 balls of fire flashed in little An's eye sockets as he swept his gaze across the people in the hall. As long as he killed this group of people, he would be 1 step closer to his goal. No matter the price, he wanted to appear before Xiao Chen with a physical body again. Everyone from the Dragon's Gate sect had reacted when Li Qingshan killed that disciple. However, they came to an abrupt halt as they looked at this strange scene in horror. Beside the flickering candlelight, a skeleton was holding a human heart and devouring it. Only 2 words appeared in their minds. Demon. Since Little and no longer possessed the ability to conceal himself, there was no need for him to do so. Li Qingshan drew the ancestral sword of the Dragon's Gate sect, the Soaring Dragon Sword, and stabbed it into the ground. I've long heard that the Dragon's Gate sect is famous for its sword arts. Littleand, come and have a spar. Littleand tossed the heart aside and grabbed the Soaring Dragon Sword. The sword was a little too big for him, but the moment he grasped the hilt, his aura changed. He was like a peerless swordsman. The tip of the sword pointed diagonally, and every single person from the Dragon's Gate sect felt like they were enveloped by the sword's aura. The disciplined hall elder's face was pale. He no longer had the confidence he had just now. As a member of a sword sect, no matter what kind of person they were, they still knew their stuff when it came to sword techniques. The person who had left behind the sword aura and sword intent on the scroll was someone who could draw a spirit artifact and was praised by oxen. Even though little and had only comprehended a portion of the sword technique from it, it surpassed all the sword techniques of a second-rate sect like the Dragon's Gate sect. The marble tiles beneath Li Qingshan's feet shattered, and he vanished from where he stood. He used the tiger demon leaping over the ravine again, ignoring everyone else in the hall and going straight for the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yang Anji. Yang Anji shouted, "Kill him!" His voice jolted everyone in the hall back to their senses. They were swordsmen who had practiced the sword for many years, so they would not be truly intimidated. They knew that this was a moment of life and death. Their eyes reddened, and they used their full strength. Over a dozen streaks of sword chi pierced towards Li Qingshan, who was in midair and had nowhere to go. Li Qingshan did not dodge or dodge. He did not even glance at the sword flashes. His pupils narrowed to the size of needles as he stared at Yang Anji like a ruthless wild beast. Yang Anji's sword was finally unsheathed. It was another treasured sword that flashed with spiritual light. Although it was slightly inferior to the soaring dragon sword, it still had the ability to cut through metal and jade. It manifested 7 layers of sword silhouettes, creating 7 sword flowers that attacked Li Qingshan. Even if the other swords could not pierce through Li Qingshan's skin, this sword would definitely take Li Qingshan's life. Just as Li Qingshan was about to make a move, little and suddenly rushed out from below. The soaring dragon sword also manifested 7 layers of sword silhouettes, creating 7 sword flowers that clashed with Yang Anji's sword, producing a series of sharp clangs. Behind Little and the group of Dragon's Gate elders and disciples froze like statues, maintaining the posture of stabbing at Li Qingshan. Horrifying wounds appeared on their necks, chests, and foreheads. Blood spurted out of their mouths at practically the same time as they fell to the ground. The instant Li Qingshan made his move, Little and held the soaring dragon sword and attacked at the same time. However, he stayed close to the ground as he passed through the hall. While everyone was attacking Li Qingshan with all their might, he instantly killed all the elders and disciples. Then he faced Yang Anji's sword. He was not a child, but a demonic cultivator who cultivated demonic arts. The soaring dragon sword was not a toy either, but a terrifying weapon that could take someone's life. When Little and first mastered the path of white bone and great beauty, Li Qingshan had once said that he could probably flatten the Black Wind stronghold alone. Now that he had comprehended the sword techniques of a spiritual artifact and used a weapon like the soaring dragon sword, Little and had finally seen just how powerful he was. This kid. Their martial prowess had gradually surpassed the realm of second-rate experts. This was the Jianghu. Under the suppression of absolute martial prowess, numbers were basically useless. Chapter 67. Yang Anji saw the hall littered with corpses. The Dragon's Gate sect's legacy had ended in his hands in the blink of an eye. This was because Li Qingshan had been a weakling in his eyes back then. Dealing with weaklings was not called provoking, but taking advantage of. However, today, Yang Anji had become the one being taken advantage of. After exchanging blows with Little and Yang Anji managed to escape from death, just in time to avoid Li Qingshan's full-powered pounce. Otherwise, if Li Qingshan used his moves, he would be confident of seeing the color of Yang Anji's heart. As for Little and, he had instantly killed 10 people and knocked away Yang Anji's sword. He was also at the end of his tether, unable to catch up immediately. "Father, save me." Yang Jun looked at the 2 monsters, within reach. He no longer had any arrogance. He extended his hand to Yang Anji, pleading for help with a face filled with fear. However, Yang Anji had no intention of stopping. He rushed to the back of the hall like a wisp of smoke. He could have more sons, but he only had 1 life. He was truly a hero who cut his losses, extremely vicious. Yang Jun instantly despaired. He closed his eyes and felt a strong wind blow at him, but he did not feel any pain. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Li Qingshan and little and did not even look at him, rushing past him and chasing after Yang Anji. Yang Anji's movement techniques were impressive. Once he got far away, it would be difficult to catch up. Yang Jun rarely took off his clothes. He ignored his sweat-drenched heavy clothes and immediately moved his feet, rushing out of the hall. He kept repeating in his heart, "I must take revenge. I must take revenge." A bone hand stabbed into his back, piercing through him. Yang Jun looked at his chest in disbelief. He took a few steps forward and fell to the ground with a thud. When Little and saw that Yang Jun wanted to escape, he swung his left arm, and his bone arm flew out like a hidden weapon, killing him. As if it was being pulled by an invisible force, the skeletal arm flew to the back of the palace. Behind the main hall was the Dragon's Gate sect's ancestral hall. It enshrined the portraits of the past sect masters of the Dragon's Gate sect. The first sect master's portrait was the largest, close to 3 meters tall. It depicted a swordsman as tall as a grown man, wielding the soaring dragon sword as he looked down on the entire ancestral hall with an indifferent expression. It was rumored that when he arrived in Qingyang, he saw bandits running amok and slaughtering the innocent, so he killed his way into the den of bandits alone and slaughtered them all. He became known as the Soaring Dragon Swordsman, which was similar to Li Qingshan's rise to fame. The commoners and gentry of Qingyang were all filled with gratitude. They asked him to stay behind, so he established a sect on the Dragon's Gate mountain and passed down martial arts, establishing the Dragon's Gate sect. However, he probably never imagined that this would happen today. No, perhaps he did. The secret passageway of the Dragon's Gate sect was built behind the offering table beneath his portrait. As long as he entered it, he would be able to pass through the center of the mountain and escape with his life from an unknown exit. This was where Yang Anji's objective lay. Yang Anji's confidence in his movement technique was crushed by the wind that constantly drew closer from behind. He only needed an instant, and he would end up like the elders and disciples in the hall. Perhaps he had lost his mind due to fear, but he actually cried out, "Save me, founding ancestor." Li Qingshan immediately pulled back the hand that he had extended towards Yang Anji's back. He was worried that Yang Anji would be like Xianxia and Wuxia, possessing trump cards that surpassed regular cultivators. With his current experience, items that belonged to the category of spiritual artifacts or techniques were not rare in this world. These techniques could be very weak, but they could also be very powerful, making it impossible for him to accurately predict them. Indeed, before Yang Anji finished speaking, a small sword on the offering table suddenly shone brightly and flew towards Li Qingshan. Although the small sword shone with golden light, it was clearly a wooden sword that had been painted gold. At this moment, it exploded with astonishing sword light, illuminating the pitch-black ancestral hall as it turned into a golden rainbow. The sword was still dozens of feet away, but Li Qingshan already felt a stabbing pain in his forehead. Furthermore, he had a feeling that no matter how he dodged, he would definitely not be able to avoid the sword's attack. Yang Anji relaxed slightly. This was a secret that only the previous Dragon's Gate sect leader knew. When their founding ancestor passed away, he did not leave behind a corpse, but only this small sword. It was very similar to the Daoist's Bingjia. He had instructed his first disciple, who was Yang Anji's ancestor, to worship and pray to this small sword every day. He could not slack off. Once a strong enemy invaded, he could call for help, and they would definitely be able to avert danger. However, it could only be used once. Although Yang Anji had also followed and prayed for decades, he did not believe this rumor at first. He had also examined the small sword, and it was only an extremely ordinary wooden sword. Any iron sword would be able to split it in half. However, he did not dare to not believe it. He had also considered how to use it, but he thought that once the Iron Fist and the Drawn Reins village joined forces with the county magistrate's troops, they would definitely attack the mountain on a large scale. With thousands of people attacking, a sword that could only be used once would not have any decisive effect. It was not until this moment of life and death that he finally gave it a try, disregarding everything else, that he actually succeeded. Li Qingshan also knew that he could not take it head-on. His body flipped in the air, but the small sword seemed to have a mind of its own. It twisted in the air and let out a shrill whistle as it tore through the air. With a whoosh, it pounced towards Li Qingshan like lightning. Li Qingshan felt that the spot between his brows was becoming more and more powerful, and cold air assaulted his face. Suddenly, he thrust his sword horizontally, piercing the body of the small sword. Little and tried to help Li Qingshan out of the predicament, but not only did his sword that could pierce through metal and stone fail to break the small wooden sword, he instead felt a huge force pass through the body of the sword. The flying dragon sword that could cut through iron like mud shattered into countless pieces, shooting in all directions. Little and was also sent flying, crashing into a pillar. However, the small sword only dimmed slightly. After a pause, it continued piercing towards Li Qingshan. It would not rest until it took his life. Li Qingshan had already retreated to a corner of the hall. Using the opportunity Little and had bought for him, he unfurled the cursive sword calligraphy and poured in his quintessence without caring about anything else. At this critical moment, a slash lit up, and a sword light soared up and shot out, clashing with the small sword that shone with golden light. There was no sound that could be considered loud. Only a ring of spiritual light spread out in the hall, like a small sun that suddenly rose up. However, Li Qingshan felt like thunder rumbled in his ears. His ears buzzed and a trickle of blood flowed out. The light dissipated very quickly, and the portraits of the Dragon's Gate sect master turned into powder and scattered. It was the same for Li Qingshan's clothes. On closer inspection, there were thousands of sword marks that were as thin as a cow's hair on the walls and floor. The shattered small sword released thousands of sword chi that were as fine as light, silently piercing through everything in the hall. Even Li Qingshan could not help but be dumbfounded by such might. The might of the flying sword left a deep impression in his mind. Yang Anji had been guarding the entrance to the secret passageway in the first place. When he saw that his assassination attempt had failed, he immediately turned around and entered the secret passageway. As long as he entered the secret passageway, he could activate the mechanism and place down a huge boulder to seal the entrance. No one would be able to catch up to him then. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.